Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelsey Richardson, and I'm Career Advisor at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for our Refresh Your Resume webinar. We're really pleased to have you join us. And I have here also with me Nikita Cassidy. She is our Data and Administrative Coordinator in Career Services, and she's going to be also providing assistance. So for tonight's webinar on refreshing your resume, we have what I call Resume 101 that we're going to be going over first. And that includes formats and designs and content and word choice so that you can really focus in on the most important elements of your resume. And then after we go over resume, we'll go over the supplemental documents, and that includes cover letters, follow-up thank you letters, the references document, online applications and profiles, and then we will conclude the evening with a Q&A where you'll have the opportunity to have your questions answered. So please feel free during the webinar to put your questions in the chat. And after we're done with the content, I will definitely save some time at the end so that I can go over, and answer your questions and, address as many questions as I possibly can. So for resume formats and designs, we're going to talk about the reverse chronological and functional resumes or combination thereof of those two styles. We're going to talk about fonts, and we're going to talk about the importance of keeping your resume consistent and clean. Another thing I should mention to all of you is that we're going to be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint, so you'll have that, and a copy of the recording of this webinar so that if you need to take a look at everything again, you'll be able to do that. So we'll definitely follow up with that. And we'll also want to hear your thoughts on what other types of programs we can bring you that would be helpful to you. So definitely look for that email after this webinar. It'll either be tomorrow or beginning of next week. Okay, so in terms of refreshing your resume and the formats, so the reverse chronological format, this is the most popular format by far, and employers still tend to prefer this format usually because it's very logically laid out. It's your experience listed in order from most recent to the least, and probably most people attending this webinar tonight have a reverse chronological format. This format focuses on your job titles and your organizations, and it highlights your career progression, your employer loyalty, and your accomplishments. So, this reverse chronological format is just really easy for employers to do a quick read of because they can quickly see where did you work, what types of jobs did you have, what were your responsibilities, and they can kind of like just do a quick look through. Whereas the functional format, on the other hand, it's focused more on your qualifications, skill sets, and achievements, and it highlights your skills, your professional skills, and your intangible skills. And it tends to be more useful for either career changers, so if you're changing careers, or for entry-level workers, or if you're re-entering the workforce after a lengthy absence. And that's because if you are a career changer or looking for an entry-level position, or you've been away from the workforce, your reverse chronological format of a resume won't serve you as well usually because it focuses more on your job titles and your experience, and it's describing every job. Whereas the functional format, that one, since the bulk of the resume talks about your skills, and then you just kind of list at the bottom of the resume your where you worked, and the experience that you've had, that focuses more on your skills, which can highlight your transferable skills, which is what you want to do when you don't have much direct experience in the field that you're looking for a position in. So I'm also going to be referring to handouts that we'll also be sending you after the webinar. And the handouts will show you the difference between these two formats. So we'll get to that shortly, but let's just talk a little bit more generally about the format for resumes. So when you're getting started to refresh your resume, I usually suggest to not use a template because even though there are tons of them out there, tons to choose from, it makes it harder for you to make changes later on to your resume. And since your resume is a document you're always adding on to and building, it's limiting if you choose some template that kind of looks fancy for the moment, but then next time you go to decide, I want to do a job search again, if you have to then start typing your resume from scratch again into a new template, it's very time consuming and it just doesn't work well. So if you start from scratch in Microsoft Word, you don't have that problem. You can just easily build on your resume. And Microsoft Word has a lot of ways that you can format it and work with it so that it still has a really nice look to it. But again, you can manipulate it in all kinds of ways that you usually cannot do with a template. Now, in terms of fonts, you want your font size to be between 10 and 12 points, usually, depending on the font you're choosing. You also want to use the same font throughout the document. You don't want to, use one font for your organization name titles and a different font for your bullet points or anything like that. You want it to be consistent. And then in terms of what font you choose to use, simpler is better. So Times New Roman, Arial, Verdana, Tahoma, those tend to be the fonts that work well. There are plenty of others, but just make sure you choose a font that has a professional look to it, because you don't want to choose something like Comic Sans, for instance, which looks like a much more casual, fun kind of font. In your resume, it's a professional document, and so you just want to make sure your font looks professional. I also usually suggest you use black only and not colors, but again, there are exceptions to this. If the field that you are in, or if it's a field that you are being a career changer into, either way, then sometimes it's a more creative field. If it's like marketing related, or if it's communications related, and there are other types of creative fields as well, then you might want to, then you can maybe choose color for your category headings or something along those lines. And if you do decide to put any color in there, just make sure it's nothing too distracting, because again, like the main thing you want to make sure you're conveying with your resume is that it's a professional looking document. And if you have bright red color throughout it, or orange or yellow, colors like that, then that can be distracting. But if you choose, navy blue or dark green, dark purple, like colors like that, that tends to not be as distracting. So also make sure that you use bold, italics, and underline for emphasis so that you can differentiate easily between your job titles and where you worked and the dates. Because remember, employers get tons of resumes when they're considering hiring for a position. And this way, if you're using, let's say, bold for your job titles, and then company names are in italics, and your dates are just in regular type, if an employer is looking through your resume really quickly, they'll be able to, their eye can just really find your different titles and your different organizations very quickly, easily, and employers really appreciate that. So you also want to make sure that your resume is consistent and clean, and that your margins stay the same throughout your entire document, that each subheading, title, location, and date is done in the same way as I was mentioning, aligned. It has the same emphasis. Like, if you're going to make the category headings bold, make all of them bold. If you're going to make your dates in italics, have all of your dates be in italics. And then typically you don't use graphics or photos in your resume, even though I know on social media, photos have taken over our lives, having a photo profile picture in, LinkedIn and Facebook and, Instagram, everywhere. But for your resume, remember, it's a professional document. And I really think actually that, in a certain number of years, probably everyone's going to have a photo on a resume, just because that seems to be the direction we're going. But we're not there yet. So I usually don't suggest photos. There are some exceptions, acting resumes usually have a photo on them, or real estate is another industry where photos are kind of expected on a resume, but there are very few exceptions. So, I would suggest that you do not do that. And then you definitely want to use bullet points, because bullets keep your resume neat and easy to read quickly. And it allows you to like lead off each bullet point with an action verb, which is also really important to do. So let's talk about content and word choice for your resume. So we'll discuss verb tenses and variety, connotation and quantity, achievements and results, summary section, buzzwords, and then overall impression. So for verb tenses and variety, usually a good rule is for your current job to have action verbs that are in the present tense, and for all of your previous jobs to have action verbs that are in the past tense. And it just makes it much easier for the employer. Because again, remember, they're doing a quick read. So it's really easy if they're doing the quick read and they see, okay, these verbs are in the present tense, right, that person's working there now. And then everything else is in the past. That each bullet point does begin with a really strong action verb, and also that you avoid repetitive words or phrases or sentences, especially right after one another. And probably one of the most repetitive action verbs is assisted. Um, you know, assisted can be used for so many different kinds of responsibilities that you have. So just avoid saying assisted, 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 like every other bullet point. You can say provided assistance to vary it some. You can say coordinated. There are different kinds of ways that you can say that. So just make sure you vary it enough, and make sure that you're using descriptive words, but don't overdo it. Always being honest with what your responsibilities are. So let me go to the sample documents so that I can show you more specifically what I'm talking about. And again, we'll be sending you a copy of these documents. So you see at the top of the resume here is, first and last name, city and state, email address, phone number, and then you can put your LinkedIn address if you'd like. If you have an e-portfolio, you can put that too. But you notice what's missing is your street address. Make sure that you do not put your street address on your resume. No one puts it anymore. I'm sure part of it is because everybody can use every line of space they can on a resume, right? But part of it is also just because identity theft is all too common now. And you want to be safer, and you do not want to have such personal information about yourself out there, your exact street address. So just put city and state, or some people don't even put city and state. They just put first name, last name, and then email address, phone number, and that's it. And that's fine as well. The other thing too is if you have a street address, an employer may look at your resume and not think you're a modern job seeker. So just make sure that you definitely do not have your street address on there. So then we've got the summary section, which always goes first if you have a summary section. It used to be objectives that were at the top of all resumes, but the summary has taken over. And I think the reason the summary is taken over is because the summary allows you to talk about the skills and attributes that you have to offer the employer. And this summary is actually, it's a combo, because it talks about skills, right, and attributes. And then the last sentence is pretty much an objective. It's saying seeking an opportunity for a full-time position, right? And that's fine. You just don't want the seeking an opportunity part to be your whole objective, right? You want it to be a summary that first gives them skills and attributes, and then you can, at the end of your summary, if you'd like, to tell them an objective they have. And then the education section here we have next. It's going to vary depending on your situation, whether experience should be next and education should be at the bottom, or whether education should be at the top. It's hard for me to give general guidelines about that, but I will just say that if you are in the process of completing a new degree, usually education at the top is better. Or if you're getting a job in the education, the higher education industry, or any part of the education field, then you definitely want your education first. But the other thing is, if you're a career changer and you do a reverse chronological format, you want your education first, because you want them to see that you're getting an education in the area you're seeking a job, and then you're kind of de-emphasizing your job history by putting experience next. But if you have experience in the field that you're getting a job in, then you usually want your experience first. Again, unless you're getting a new degree and you're about to finish it, then you'd want to be highlighting it by putting your education on top. But again, it's case by case basis. So for education here, you see, it says degree, it says expected January, or June, May, whenever your degree is expected, you definitely want to be putting that. A lot of times I see when I'm reviewing resumes, it says, beginning date dash present, like it would in the experience section. And you don't want to do that for education, because employers care about, when is this person going to be completing the degree? When is the degree expected? So put expected, and then just project a date. Even if you're not completely sure, that's fine. Just do your best guesstimate, for when that is. And then down in the experience section, you'll see here the name of organization and titles are italicized, and the dates are in bold, locations in bold, and then there are bullet points here. And so these bullet points for this present job, right, are manage, work, assist, implement, right? But then for the previous job here, authored, wrote, worked, all past tense. So just make sure you're very conscious of that, your tenses with your action verbs. And then this resume goes on to a second page, and that's absolutely fine for your resume to have 2 pages. It used to be employers wanted 1-page resumes. They were really strict about that long ago, but not anymore, thank goodness, because a lot of us need more space. So definitely feel free to go onto a second page, but I would not recommend that you go more than 2 pages, because most employers don't have the patience for more than 2 pages. So again, feel free to go onto a second page. And if you do go onto page 2, make sure that here you'll see at the bottom, first name, last name, page 2. So you can put your name and page 2 at the bottom, or you could also do it as a header at the top. Either place is absolutely fine, but you just want to make sure that you identify your second page in case an employer prints out your resume and the pages get separated. This way, they'll know it belongs to you. So I definitely recommend that. And then this is another reverse chronological format sample here. This is a 1-pager, but this one here, it's got the summary, right? And then the next section is actually selected skills rather than, going right into education. So you can do that as well. Then here's education, and then experience is there. And, again, like this emphasis is just a little bit different. Like organization names are in bold, but job titles are italicized, right? And all the jobs are in the past tense, so you'll see all the action verbs are in the past tense. So just be conscious of all of that. Now, let's go to the functional format sample. So with this sample, there's also a summary at the top. And for this one, you'll notice that this particular candidate has decided to bullet point the summary, which is also fine. And they're also calling it summary of qualifications, which is also fine. So, feel free to do your summary in bullet points or to do it as a paragraph like the other samples did. It's really your preference. Either one is absolutely fine. And then the next section after your summary would be relevant skills. And then you would have subcategories of the relevant skills. And for this particular sample, it's sales and new account development, customer relations, and then advertising, marketing, and distribution. And then this is where accomplishments go and responsibilities that you've had. And then instead of bullet pointing out job responsibilities specifically for each job, instead just employment history. And there's the dates, title, organization name and location, and that's it. So this is really emphasizing the above, right here where we've got relevant skills, because, if you're a career changer, again, or entry level, or you've been away from the workforce for a while, you really want to emphasize your relevant skills to the position that you're going for. So this is definitely, the way you would do that if that's your situation. And then here, education as at the bottom there, and that's it for this particular sample. So let me go back to PowerPoint. Okay, so let's talk about connotation and quantity. You want to make sure that when you are describing your responsibilities, that you're choosing positive phrases to evoke a favorable impression of the work you've done and are doing if you have a present job. Make sure you think about adding numbers, percentages, dollar amounts, statistics to add credibility, but always, of course, being honest about what those are. You also want to make sure that your resume is focused on being achievement and results oriented. So, always indicate promotions or expanded responsibilities. You can always have like your last bullet point of your present job be promoted from coordinator position, so that they're aware that you were promoted. And you want to make sure that you're adding those little things that are outside of your job description, because just because like a certain administrative coordinator at one organization would have certain responsibilities, doesn't mean it's the same at another organization. So that's why you definitely want to make sure that you're being as descriptive as possible, because it just varies depending on the organization's needs and the way they're structured, what your responsibilities are actually going to be. So make sure you do that. Describe any special projects you've managed, ideas and solutions you've implemented, and the way it made a difference, whether that's cost savings, increased efficiency, whatever that is. And also make sure that you include any managerial duties that you have, particularly like if your title doesn't indicate it, um, you know, they definitely won't think that you've done anything related to managerial duties. So that's why if you've participated in assisting with hiring or training, any aspect of performance management or scheduling other employees, any of that kind of work, you definitely want to be indicating that in your bullet points. Okay, so let's talk about the summary a bit more there. So the summary is useful for experienced professionals, but it's really useful for everyone. So I definitely, when I'm reviewing resumes, with students and alumni, I definitely suggest having that summary on there. And you also should think of the summary as kind of like your personal pitch, because it's the first thing that an employer is going to see on your resume, right? And it really details your most relevant skills and attributes that you have to offer the employer. And that's what you're doing when you're creating like an elevator pitch, when you're doing that in preparation for networking. And it's really like an overview of your qualifications, and it can include an objective as part of it. So in terms of buzzwords, now you want to make sure that your resume does contain industry-specific language. So, make sure that when you're describing your responsibilities, make sure that you are, describing it in ways that people in the industry will understand. But be careful with acronyms, because you might think that, everybody knows what an acronym stands for, but sometimes they don't, just depending on where, what their background is, the particular employer. So one example of that, though, is actually I see a lot of resumes that under the education section, it says CUNY SPS. And I know that, for SPS students, we say CUNY SPS all the time. That's our lingo, and it's an acronym that it's constantly used. But an employer that maybe has never heard of SPS before, they've heard CUNY, but maybe not SPS specifically, they don't know what it stands for. So you definitely want to be spelling out CUNY School of Professional Studies on your resume, so it doesn't say CUNY SPS. Also, take cues from the job postings about what skills you're going to be putting in either your skills section or your summary, because remember, these online application systems are programmed to flag resumes with certain what we call the keywords in there. And so what you want to do is for every single job application that you send, every time you're sending your resume, you want to look at that job posting, look in the qualification section and see what skills are they saying are really important for this particular job. What are they saying in that qualification section of the job posting? And then you go to your resume and then you tweak it for that job posting. So it takes more work and it takes more time, but it's definitely worth it to do this because if you are able to have some of the same skill language in your resume that they're asking for in the job posting, you are so much more likely to get flagged for an interview because remember, computers are literal. If you describe your skills in, as synonyms, different ways than they're saying it in the job posting, the computer's going to just pass you by because it doesn't recognize it. But it's specifically looking for certain keywords, and usually they base those keywords on the skill language that they're putting in that qualification section of the job posting. So make sure that if you're going to do this and tweak your resume for each job posting, you have a really organized way of saving your resumes. So make sure that, for instance, if I was going to apply for a career advisor job at Hunter College, I would say Kelsey Richardson resume _ Hunter College. I would do the same with the cover letter. When I put the keywords in the cover letter too, I would say Kelsey Richardson cover letter _ Hunter College. And if it was Baruch, I would do the same thing, So do that. And then when they call you for an interview, you'll know exactly which organization you sent that particular resume and cover letter to. And then just always making sure that you're focusing on your most relevant and current skills. Okay, so overall impression. So you want to make sure that you have an error-free resume when you send it out. You don't want any typos on there. You don't want any missing words. You don't want any, format mistakes, where your margins are off, or your half of your job titles are in bold and half are in italics. Like, you don't want anything like that going on. You want to make sure that really gives a really professional overall impression. So I suggest print it out for your final review. And sometimes we can catch mistakes from a printed document that we wouldn't see on the screen because we're looking at screens constantly now, by the time we're online and, doing all kinds of things. And so you want to make sure that you have different ways of trying to be able to catch what those mistakes might be. So printing it out can be helpful. Going over it out loud, like reading your resume aloud to yourself. You might notice a missing word more easily if you're reading it to yourself as opposed to reading it just with your eyes. You might just skip over it. So that's another way. And then one other way, as sort of like a double check, is to read it from the bottom to the top. And that's because if we're reading it from the top to the bottom, sometimes you can just go into automatic pilot and you have lived your resume. You've seen it a million times. And so you might not catch a mistake that way. So if you start at the bottom and you work your way up to the top, it just kind of takes you out of automatic pilot and allows you to see things that sometimes you wouldn't necessarily see. So I definitely would suggest all of those ways of proofing your resume. And, having another set of eyes look at your resume is also, of course, very, very valuable because since it is your resume, it does make it harder for you to see an error than it does usually if you have another person take a look at it. So do all of those things before, you have your final refresh of your resume. And, that will definitely give the best impression to the employers. Okay, so let's start talking about the supplemental documents. Cover letter is first one up. So for cover letter writing tips, you want to make sure that your cover letter is targeted and specific. You don't want to be using any form templates where you're just plugging in the name of the organization and that's it. You want to make sure that you are specifically targeting the skills that they're asking for in that job posting, just like I was telling you to customize your resume. with the skill language that they're using, the keywords. You want to be putting those same keywords also in your cover letter. So make sure that you do make your cover letters targeted and specific. And you want to also know that sometimes the cover letter can make or break your chances. I mean, I'm often asked, like, do these employers even look at cover letters? And you definitely will find some employers that don't bother with the cover letter. They don't even bother to look at it. And so it seems like a waste of time. But you're not going to know which employer is going to be looking at it versus which employer isn't. So you really want to give your best effort no matter what with the cover letter. Make sure it's showing, your personality, your enthusiasm, your passions there. And a cover letter can prove you're a serious candidate. For instance, if it says cover letter optional, that can make the difference between if you take the extra time to submit the cover letter and resume, even though they're actually indicating it's optional and not requiring it, then they may go, oh, great. Okay. So these candidates took the time to do a cover letter, even though we didn't require it. Okay, well, they're one step closer to getting an interview. Some employers will do that and they'll break it down that way. So definitely, it's worth it to go that extra mile to submit that cover letter. And then your cover letter also helps you prepare for a future interview because you've customized it for the job posting, so you'll be able to go back to it and get that. When you get informed that you're going to be interviewed, you get that call or that email, and then you can read over your cover letter the night before, look at your resume specifically that you sent to that job posting, and it really helps you prepare. So let's take a look at the sample documents again, and let's take a look at 2 cover letters. This first one is what I call the more modern version of the cover letter because you'll see it has bullet points in it. It starts off here. I'm currently exploring positions related to whatever industry, and I'm interested in applying for whichever position was posted. My resume is supposed for your review. But then in the bullet points, you should list, if you're going to do this style of cover letter, 3 to 4 responsibilities or achievements that would show why you're a strong candidate, or you can include academic projects that may be relevant. You can mention those and use numbers or quantities when that's relevant to show your impact. The next cover letter I'll show you is more the traditional 3-paragraph style. And either of these formats are absolutely fine. It's really your choice. It's whatever you would like to do, whatever kind of resonates more with you. You choose. But, some people prefer the bullet points because it can make it easier to sort of organize what you're saying in the cover letter. And some employers prefer the bullet points because, again, it's a faster read. But again, the 3-paragraph style is fine as well. So at the end of the cover letter, you do want to make sure that you are reiterating your contact information. Please contact me at phone number and email address at any time. Thanking them for your time and consideration. And usually you see the closing here is sincerely. Sometimes, when I'm reviewing cover letters, I'll see regards or I'll see yours truly or, other kinds of closings. But sincerely is usually the best one because it's just a very business-like closing. And your cover letter is a business document, just like your resume is a business document. And it's usually the most straightforward, best one to use. Let me go up also to the greeting here. So dear, you want to say dear hiring manager if you don't know their name. And it used to be, you could say dear sir/madam, or to whom it may concern if you didn't know their name. But for whatever reason, employers these days, they really like dear hiring manager. If you know their name, of course, definitely go with that. But if you don't know their name, I really strongly suggest you say dear hiring manager, because if employers these days get cover letters that say to whom it may concern or dear sir/madam, they tend to think, is this a modern job seeker? Because nobody puts that anymore. Everybody knows that we want to be addressed to your hiring manager, which everybody doesn't know, but they assume everyone knows. So definitely, you're here at this webinar, now you know, so definitely address them as dear hiring manager. So the next cover letter sample Dear hiring manager, you see there, right? Um, this one just starts off, I'm writing in response to the job posting for, particular position. You just posted on CareerLink, and explaining that it's the career management portal of the CUNY School of Professional Studies. So in the middle paragraph, that is where skills and education are emphasized. And then at the end, it's, I would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you at your convenience to discuss my background and qualifications in greater detail. I can be reached at, or, so phone number, email, reiterating your contact information again. And thank you for your time and consideration, sincerely. So again, like either of these cover letter styles are absolutely fine. It's really your choice. So definitely, you choose and go with one of those. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right. So, so you definitely want to make sure that you are, setting yourself apart with your cover letter. And again, that means making sure that it's error free, that it's detailing, the most relevant skills, and you're basing it on that job posting to be putting those keywords in there. This tip here, citing the job requirements and how you're qualified, that usually works best with the bullet pointed version of the cover letter. And you want to make sure that you're showing them your enthusiasm for the position and the organization in there somewhere. And that can be different ways. I mean, it can just be saying, I was really excited to see the listing for this position, or it can be talking about how the mission of their organization is a mission that really resonates with you. So, find a way to do that. And then in terms of salary information, I often get the question, should that be mentioned in the cover letter, the salary that you're looking for? And the answer to that is only if they ask you. So there are some job postings where they will say, please state your salary requirements. If they ask you to do it, then you definitely want to follow their instructions and do it. Because, some students and alumni I've worked with said, it asked me to do that, but I didn't know what to say, so I just didn't include it. You don't want to do that, because then you're not following their instructions, and they might just, anyone who doesn't do what they've asked them to do for the application process, it concerns them, because then they think, if they hire you, will you follow instructions as an employee? So definitely, if they ask you to include salary, information, you want to do that. And usually in the cover letter, the best place for it is that last paragraph. So you could just have a first sentence that says, my salary requirements are, and then you just put a range in there. You don't ever want to just put one number. Just put your range. Usually about a $5,000 range is good. So, my salary requirements are, um, 65 to 70,000, or 55 to 60,000, or 75 to 80,000, whatever it is, depending on your experience level and the type of organization, all of that. And salary.com is a really good website for being able to look and see the different salary ranges for the types of jobs that you're looking for. So again, that's salary.com. Okay, so let's touch on follow-up thank you letters. So your follow-up thank you letter, are they necessary? Yes, the answer to that is absolutely a resounding yes. Make sure that you take the time to send a thank you letter after you, interview for a position, because they definitely want to know that you appreciate the time that they spent with you. And it also just reminds them that you're a candidate and you're still interested in the position. It's a way to reiterate your interest in the position. So there's a sample of a follow-up thank you letter in the supplemental materials that we're going to send you, these sample documents. So definitely take a look through the sample of that. So if you're not sure about how, if you're doing your thank you letters the right way or whatever, just take a look at the sample, and that would be very helpful. Usually emailing versus snail mail. Email is much faster and it's much more common, so I would highly suggest email. The length and the content, it's not too long, but you want to make sure that you are reiterating the skills and attributes that you have to offer the employer. So, you want to make sure you're not just saying, Thank you for taking the time to interview me. I appreciate, your time and consideration sincerely. That's not enough. You want to go into your skills a bit and, that you're enthusiastic. You're even more enthusiastic about the job now that they took the time to meet with you or whatever it is. So again, just take a look at the sample and, we'll give you some more ideas. And, you can also ask about next steps in the thank you letter, which is another way to prompt them to let you know, are they moving you forward in the interviewing process, or it just kind of it's just a way to remind employers, again, that you are eager to hear from them. And sometimes it prompts them when they're so busy with other things, they're not just usually focusing on hiring for a new position. They have so many other responsibilities, and so when they receive the thank you letter, just prompts them to focus on that job search more. So okay. The references document. Now, references, make sure that it's a separate document from your resume. Don't list your references on your resume, or have it be a page of your resume. You don't want to do that. You just want to make it completely separate, because this is really like a provide upon request only document. And for your references, usually it's 3 professional contacts, and you just want to have them ready and prepared for when you are asked for them. And a lot of times, the reason, I would say, like, don't just automatically send references along with your resume and a cover letter, is because you can look presumptuous as a candidate if you just automatically include your references, because a lot of times employers will ask you for references when they're seriously considering you for a position. And if you just automatically, upon first applying for the job, submit your references, and they might think, I haven't even interviewed this person, why are they sending me their references already? So definitely wait for them to ask, but have them ready. And the professional contacts you want to ask, it can be a combination. It can be 2 former employers and a former professor, current professor. It can be 2 professors and 1 former employer. It can be a combination, like sort of whatever works best for you in terms of the strongest references that you can get. But it can be in the academic realm and in the work realm. So just keep that in mind. And make sure you check with your references and get the permission, because you don't ever want a reference to be surprised. Like, don't assume that because you did well in, a professor's class, that they would be a reference for you, or don't assume that a former employer would definitely say great things about you. I mean, usually you have a good sense of that from having worked with them, but you'll get more of a sense, when you contact someone and you say, would it be okay for me to use you as a reference? If they hesitate in some kind of way, or they reluctantly agree, say, thank you so much, I appreciate you agreeing, but then maybe choose somebody else, because if they're hesitant, there might be a reason they're hesitant, and they might not give you as glowing a reference. So you definitely, you want to be getting enthusiastic responses back when you ask people for permission to use them as reference. Now, online applications and profiles. Just keep in mind just some general tips about these, that you want to make sure that you're filling out your online applications and your profiles, at various different sites, job sites, completely, right? Fill them out completely. Usually there are copying and pasting options versus uploading, and definitely when they allow you to upload documents, it's usually better to upload them, because it'll preserve your formatting for you, and it usually preserves it best if you use PDF documents as opposed to Microsoft Word documents. So pay attention to all the details. You want to also, on online applications, be honest and forthcoming, answering all their questions, using your references sheet. If they do ask you to put reference information in an online application, because sometimes they will ask that, and using your resume, to as a guide as you're filling out where you worked and what your main responsibilities were. So just keep all of your information consistent. And again, including optional documents. So if they say the cover letter is optional, I highly recommend that you definitely go for it and do that. You also want to make sure you're updating your profiles regularly. So LinkedIn, for instance, particularly, make sure that, if you've gotten a new position recently, or if, there are additional responsibilities that you've taken on in your workplace, make sure that you add that to your LinkedIn profile, because you want to make sure your profile is consistent with your resume that you're sending these potential new employers. So just make sure you keep up with all of that in terms of your online applications and profiles. Another thing I wanted to touch on briefly is the ePortfolio. Um, at SPS, there's the ePortfolio site, and I know for SPS students, some of you worked in ePortfolios in some of your classes, but ePortfolio can just be a really great way to be able to showcase your academic work, as well as putting your resume in there. And it can be a great way for employers to also be able to learn about you. So the contact information here to contact our ePortfolio team at SPS is right in this slide. So again, you'll be receiving this slide as a follow-up after this webinar. So definitely contact them if you're interested in either, expanding on the portfolio you already have, or if you would like to create one. And then I also want to mention before I go to questions that we have some upcoming programs, and make sure that you consider attending these programs. We have Interviewing Insights happening Wednesday, March 6th is the evening one. And then Thursday, April 4th is the daytime one. And then we have the semester online career meetups that we're having. And the first one is March 12th, Careers in Healthcare. And the second one is April 11th, Careers in Business and Technology. And then the third one is Careers in Psychology, Sociology, and Human Relations. And so make sure, that you attend those for networking opportunities, opportunity to meet hiring managers and recruiters. And it's just a really helpful way to be able to progress, professionally in the field. Okay, so now we've come to question time. So I want to make sure that I address any questions that you have. So let's see. Let's take a look here. Okay, I'm only seeing one question so far. So, we do have a few more minutes. So if there are any additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat so that, I can make sure that I address any additional questions. But the one question that I see here is whether it's important to keep your resume focused on let's see, on just the job that you're looking for, in terms of like which other jobs you should put on there, or whether you should just have all of your jobs on there. And so that's a really good question. And in order to give a complete answer to that, I would probably need to see your resume and know what field you're talking about, and know the relevancy of the jobs that you've held before. But basically, what you want to do is you want to focus on your most recent and relevant jobs and have those on there. And you generally don't want to go back more than about 10 years or so, unless you've held one or two jobs in 10 years, and then you want to go back one more job, which takes you past 10 years back. That's fine. But that's sort of a general rule. But if you're a person who's had several jobs, in the last 6 years, let's say you've had 4 jobs in the last 6 years, then you can just go back 6 years. So again, that's, it's a case-by-case basis. So it's going to depend on your situation, but just keep that in mind as you refresh your resume. Okay, I think I just see another question come in. When do you recommend to send a follow-up email after an interview? Should this be done after each interview round, or if there are multiple? Okay, so yeah, so for the follow-up thank you letter, I definitely suggest that you do it after every single interview. So there are some organizations that will have an extensive interviewing process, and sometimes they'll have you come back 3 times. Like it'll be a three, a process of three interviews. And if that's the case, you should send the thank you each time after each interview. So again, you're gonna, it's gonna feel a bit redundant because you're gonna be reiterating your interest in the position. But if there's something that you discussed in each of those interviews that's a little bit different that you can emphasize, do that. Sometimes it's different people. So they might have you interview with like the hiring manager first, and then HR for one interview, and then a team of people that you've work with closely for another interview. And so since that's different people, then those thank yous can be more similar because you're expressing your gratitude, to different people. But if it's multiple interviews with a same person present, then just make sure you vary it enough for each time you send that thank you letter. But each one is definitely important, because if you send a thank you just for the first one and you don't for the subsequent ones, they may think you're not as interested. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Oh, more questions have come in now. Great. All right. Should I alter my resume for a specific job when applying to multiple jobs? So, yes, definitely you want to be putting your keywords, as I was mentioning earlier, in each time you do your resume, you want to definitely tweak it, and you want to have that organized way of saving your resume. So that, again, like if I was applying for a career advisor job at Hunter and Baruch, I would say Kelsey Richardson resume underscore Hunter College, Kelsey Richardson resume underscore Baruch College. And then I'm looking in the job posting to see what did they put in the skills section there, the qualification section, what skill language are they using, and I'm putting those keywords into my resume that I'm sending them, because these online applications are really programmed to flag your resume for these particular keywords. And also it's that language that they're speaking, when they read a resume and cover letter that reflects back the skills they're asking for, when they read it too, it resonates with them more. So you definitely want to be doing that. Okay, so what are some things we can put into our resume to stick out if we don't have much experience to showcase? So yeah, great question. What can you put in your resume to stand out? You definitely you can highlight your academic experience in more detail. So that's one thing you can do. So you can put in your education section, you can put relevant coursework. You can list some of the names of your courses. You can also add a volunteer experience section to your resume if that's appropriate for your field. And you have volunteer experience to add. You could put a leadership experience section for any student club experience or other leadership experience that you have to add to it as well. So you can definitely do things like that to add to your resume. Okay, let's see. Another question. Do you think we should send a thank you email after a screening phone call? So, screening phone calls will vary. If it's a screening phone call where it's pretty brief and quick, and they're just trying to get a quick feel for you, and whether they think you get a sense that they thought they were going to interview you, but they just wanted to kind of like hear your voice, speak to you for a moment, and it's really quick phone call, then no, don't send a thank you. That's not necessary. But if it's actually a mini interview where they're asking you interview questions during the screening phone call, absolutely send them a thank you after that, because that may be what makes a difference between you making it from that screening phone call to an actual in-person or Zoom interview. Okay, so the last question I have here is, I might have missed this information. I'm in the works of updating my resume. Would I be able to submit for review and feedback? So yes, so if you are an SPS student, and I'm sure it works similarly at other CUNY schools as well, but if you're an SPS student, you can definitely go onto our career management site career link, and you can submit your resume for review, or you can make an appointment for a resume review through career link as well. So feel free to do either of those those ways are absolutely fine for you to do. Great. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. Your resume is such an important document, and um, as I mentioned, we'll be sending you the follow-up materials that you can refer back to them as you refresh your resumes. And just know that you want to take the time with it and really um, put your best foot forward with these employers. And we wish the best for you with that process. And again, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the